Have you ever done something simply on principle because it was the right thing to do, knowing that you couldn't explain it to anyone without there even being a good feeling attached to your act? Well, Karl Rahner wrote that. And then he added, if you have done this, you have experienced God, perhaps without even knowing it. Many years ago, Al Capone virtually owned Chicago. Capone wasn't famous for anything heroic. He was notorious for enmeshing the Windy City in everything from bootleg booze, prostitution, to murder. Now, Capone had a lawyer nicknamed Easy Eddie. He was Capone's lawyer for a very good reason. Eddie was a very skillful, shrewd operator. In fact, Eddie's prowess at legal maneuvering kept Big Al out of jail for a long time. And to show his appreciation, Capone paid him very well. Not only was the money big, but Eddie got special dividends as well. For instance, he and his family occupied a fenced-in mansion with live-in help and all of the conveniences of the day. The estate was so large that it filled an entire Chicago city block. Eddie lived the high life of the Chicago mafia and gave little consideration to the atrocity that went on all around him. Eddie did have one soft spot. He had a son that he loved dearly. Eddie saw to it that his young son had clothes, cars, a good education. Nothing was withheld. Price was no object. And despite his involvement with organized crime, Eddie even tried to teach him right from wrong. Eddie wanted his son to be a better man than he was. Yet with all his wealth and influence, there were two things that he couldn't give his son. He couldn't pass on a good name or a good example. So one day, Easy Eddie reached a very difficult decision. He wanted to rectify the wrongs that he had done. He decided he would go to the authorities and tell the truth about Al Scarface Capone, clean up his tarnished name, and offer his son some semblance of integrity. But to do this, he would have to testify against the mob, and he knew that the cost would be great. Within a year, Easy Eddie's life ended in a blaze of gunfire on a lonely Chicago street. But in his eyes, he had given his son the greatest gift that he had to offer at the greatest price that he could ever pay. Police removed from his pockets a rosary, a crucifix, and a clipping from a magazine. And it read, "The clock of life is wound but once, and no man has the power to tell just when the hands will stop at late or early hour. Now is the only time you own. Live life well." Now, World War II produced many heroes. One such man was Lieutenant Commander Butch OHare. He was a fighter pilot assigned to the aircraft carrier Lexington in the South Pacific. One day, his entire squadron was sent on a mission. After he was airborne, he looked at his fuel gauge and he realized that someone had forgotten to top up his fuel tank. He would not have enough fuel to complete his mission and get back to his ship. His flight leader told him to return to the carrier, so reluctantly he dropped out of the formation and he headed back to the fleet. And as he was returning to the mothership, he saw something that turned his blood cold. a squadron of Japanese aircraft was speeding its way towards the American fleet. The American fighters had gone on a sortie, and the fleet was all but defenseless. He couldn't reach his squadron and bring them back in time to save the fleet, nor could he warn the fleet of the approaching danger. But there was one thing he could do. He must somehow divert them from the fleet. So, laying aside all thoughts of personal safety, he dived into the formation of Japanese planes. Wing-mounted 50 caliber guns blazed as he charged in, attacking one surprised enemy plane and then another. Butch wove in and out of the broken formation and fired at as many planes as possible until his ammunition was finally spent. Undaunted, he continued his assault. He dived at the planes, trying to clip a wing or a tail in the hope of damaging as many enemy planes as possible, rendering them unfit to fly. Finally, the exasperated Japanese squadron took off in another direction, aircraft carrier. Upon arrival, he reported in and related the event surrounding his return. The film from the gun camera mounted on his plane told the whole story. It showed the extent of Butch's daring attempt to protect his fleet. He had, in fact, destroyed 5 enemy aircraft. This incident took place on February the 20th, 1942. And for that action, Butch became the Navy's first ace of World War II and the first naval aviator to win the Medal of Honor. But a year later, Butch was killed in aerial combat at the age of 29. His hometown would not allow the memory of this World War II hero to fade. And today, OHare International Airport in Chicago is named in tribute to the courage of this great man. So the next time you find yourself at OHare International, give some thought to visiting Butch's memorial, displaying his statue and his Medal of Honor. It's located right between Terminal 1 and Terminal 2. So my friends, what do these two stories have to do with each other? Well, I'll tell you. Butch OHare was Easy Eddie's son. The last temptation, that is the greatest treason, is to do the right thing for the wrong reason. T.S. Eliot said that. Jesus would add that doing the right thing is reason enough. God bless you.